In this video, I'm going to show you how to install 3-tab shingles. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This channel is all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get a notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask you in return for making this video. So we got a lot to go over today, so let's get started. The 3-tab shingles that I'll be installing are made by GAF. Now these shingles came with this barn kit that I built, and if you'd like to see that video, check out link description. I show you step by step how I built this barn. But I usually install architectural shingles, but because these came with the barn kit, that's why I'm installing the 3 tabs. Now these are going to give you more of a uniform look compared to architectural or dimensional shingles. So these are a little more time consuming to install, but not too much more complicated. So what I got here are what are called the caps. Now these are going to go right on top of the peak of the roof. And I also got vent I need to install that I'm going to show you how to do as well. So you can also cut the caps out of the shingles themselves. So I'll show you that later in this video. If you'd like to check these shingles out for yourself, I'll put a link to them in the description below. My first piece of advice is do not work off a ladder, scaffold, or get on a roof if you are not comfortable. I've been doing this for years, so I'm comfortable doing it. And I also like to wear fall protection when I am in an elevated area. So if I'm up on top of the roof, I always wear my safety harness. And this is what I like to use, is this bucket of safe tie. It comes with your rope, it comes with the harness, it comes with a bracket that secures to the roof. So that way when I'm up there, I feel safe. And yes, fall protection is one thing, but using common sense is another. If you'd like to check out this exact bucket of safe tie, I'll put a link in the description below so you can see it for yourself. Before installing the roof paper, it's important to install your drip edge here first. That way, when water comes down the roof paper, it goes over the drip edge and not under it. Some people will put their roof paper on first, then the drip edge, but that's not what you want to do. You want to put your drip edge on first. Now your gable ends, you don't have to put your drip edge on yet until after the roof paper. So in order to install this, we're just going to lay it to where the bottom edge is going to lay against the overhang of the roof. And then we're going to hold it flush with this very edge of the gable and place 1¼ inch galvanized roofing nails every 16 inches or so. And if you have your coil nailer for putting your shingles on, you could also shoot it on with that real quick as well. But we're just going to hand drive this on before we do that. To install the next piece, what we need to do is overlap this at least 2 inches. We simply just slide it right over. And what I do is use my hammer, but use the bottom part of where the handle is. This is kind of a rubberized handle. Then we'll just tap it together, just like that. And then place a nail right here in the overlap and then continue nailing it. You can see nailing at the joint keeps the overlap looking good, and especially from below where it counts. Finish up this run, we're going to get a measurement and add 2 inches for our overlap. It's 42 to here, so we're going to add 2, so we got 44-inch cut. Using a speed square, I'm just going to mark a straight line here. And back here, same thing, just a simple straight line. This doesn't have to be perfect. Pretty well won't be able to see it from below, but we're going to cut on that using 10 snips. I'm going to cut this side here first. And then back here, and then down the face. And that's all there is to cutting it to length. After we have this cut to length, we just install it like we typically would. I'm going to be installing synthetic roof paper for this. Synthetic roof paper is superior over felt paper because this stuff does not blow off very easy. And it's also great because it can sit on here for a long time and not degrade either. So it's definitely recommended to use synthetic roofing underlayment compared to felt paper, in my opinion. So we're going to hold this slightly past this edge, and then we're going to hold it right on the bottom of this drip edge and nail it at every bullseye that you see here on the paper. In this area where it overlaps, that's going to get the overlap, then we'll nail this overlap with the nailer. You can use cap nails and hand drive it if you want, but I'm going to be using this cap stapler. This thing is worth its weight in gold. When you nail on cap nails, you'll know how hard it is, but this stapler is the way to go. Just drives a staple through this cap, and that's what holds the paper on. Very nice. So we're going to start by nailing this on now. I like to nail the edge really well so that way the wind won't blow it off. And again, we're going to pull it out here a little ways and hit the bullseyes. Because of the roof design of a barn, it is a little bit challenging starting your first couple rows of the underlayment on the roof. On a standard roof, you can typically lay the roll down and just roll it out across the roof, but because you clearly cannot do that here, it was something that did take 2 people. Now that I have all the roof underlayment on, I can install the drip edge over the rake side of the gable end. And we're going to do what we did similar here. We're going to place this flush with the bottom of the start. And then we're going to let this run as long as we can, but we're going to cut it to go over the bend of this gable end. Whenever you get into the peak of your gable end, or in this case at the bend of this gable end, we're just going to cut at the same degree as this joint. Then we're just going to fold it right over the edge of the roof and nail it into place. Using this method, you can see it's quick and it looks really good. Also, whenever we continue the run off the sides, we're going to finish it up once we get up on the roof to continue the shingles. When installing shingles in general, it's important to place a starter strip at the eave and rake of the building. And this is the standard 3-tab that we're going to be installing. We're actually going to make our starter using the shingle itself. We're just going to cut the tabs off more or less, so that way we have our adhesive here that's going to seal on the shingle whenever we install it, just as a typical starter strip would. So that's very important. Some people would just install the shingle this way as well as your starter and then place your first row like so. But the only problem with that is you don't have your adhesive here and you'd have to place your own adhesive to do that. It's best, in my opinion, just to use the shingle itself's adhesive. So we're going to go ahead and cut our starters first. I have my cut station inside the barn here so I don't have to be in the sun. To make the starter, I'm going to flip this over, take a framing square and just go from the tabs cut out end to tabs cut out end, and then we're going to use that to cut off the tabs. All right, we removed those tabs. We can discard these, can't really use those for anything. Now you see we have a piece of starter strip ready to go. Again, it's definitely easier just to buy a starter strip, but it's going to take 11 of these to go across the eave on each side. This is going to be the first starter, and because we're going to be using a full shingle, we want to make sure that we cut 6 inches off this, because if you don't, it's going to line up over here and you can't have that. So we need to start here. So we're going to cut 6 inches off so our break is correct. And there's a mark here on the shingle already. You can see there's little cuts more or less, and this marks exactly where we need to cut for our starters. So we're just going to use that line as our cut. And you'll notice that's right at 6 inches. So 6 inches, then the next mark's 18, then the next mark's 30. So it's already marked for you, which is really nice. Cut this off. If you have experience installing architectural or dimensional shingles, you'll notice that these shingles cut way easier than those shingles. I'm now going to cut the shingle for the second row as our starter shingle. Our first row is going to take a full shingle, so our second row we need to cut 6 inches off. If we flip this around, for our second row we just need to cut right here. For the third row, we cut in line with the center of this tab's notch. And then we cut right in half at this mark. And then we're going to cut right here at this tab notch. And then we cut this off at this mark for our last one. So it's already pre-marked, so we're going to cut and then lay these out. To cut, simply take a framing square, hold square off the shingle, and cut right down the mark. This is going to be used on the other side of the roof. And this is going to be used on this side for our second row. So we're going to cut our next one. To make this more clear, I'm cutting the starter shingles for this side of the roof. When I say the scrap piece is going to be used on the other side of the roof, I'm talking about using it as starters for this side of the roof. So ultimately, whenever we make one cut, we're cutting 2 starters, one for one side of the roof, then one for the other. For the third row, we're going to flip over. And now I'm going to cut right here at the breaks of the tab. So this is going to go on the other side of the roof as a starter, and this will be for our 3rd row starter. Here's for the 4th row. We're going to cut right in half. For the other side of the roof, and this is for the next row. For this one, we're going to cut right here at the tab. This is for the other side of the roof starter, and this is for the next row on this side of the roof. And for the last starter, so this is for the one we're getting ready to do now, then this for the other side of the roof. That's all there is for cutting the shingles for starting the rows. To significantly increase the speed of the installation, I highly recommend a coil nailer, but they do come with some challenges that you do got to watch. Whenever it's really hot out like it is today, it's over 90 degrees here today, we need to make sure that the pressure in the tank is set correctly. If you have the pressure too high in your air compressor, it'll shoot right through the shingle, and you definitely don't want to do that. In fact, some people will hand nail just because of that. But I found if you turn your pressure down, then I can adjust the depth of my nail with my nail gun and monitor closely the depth in which it's shooting. If it's shooting too deep, you want to adjust your depth accordingly. And if it's shooting too shallow, you can adjust it there as well. And if it gets cooler, you can increase the pressure of your tank and vice versa. So keep that in mind. So very important. But I highly recommend a coil nailer regardless. It's going to make the job much quicker. Also, the nails I'll be using are 1.25 inches, same as the hand-driven nails, and they're galvanized. And something about these nails, whenever you're placing them in your tool bag, a good little trick is to take the nails and place them together like this, and then you can place it down your bag without them catching it. Just a quick simple tip. Let's get to installing these shingles. I'm right here where the eave and the rake meet, and I'm going to measure up 11.5 inches and measure over 11.5 inches because I want a 1/2 inch overhang for my shingle. I can do up to a 3/4 or as small as a 1/4 inch, so whatever you want, that's up to you and your local building codes. But for me, a 1/2 inch is going to be fine. So I'm going to measure that off this side and off the eave side and chalk a line. All right, we got our chalk line for our rake side. Now we're going to chalk the eave side. Now that we have a chalked line for our first row, we'd like to also chalk a line for our starter strip. And the reason why we don't like to use the same line for the starter strip and just lining up our shingle is because there is some variation when we cut them. So if we want it precise, we chalk 2 different lines here for this with these 3 tabs. So to give me the best looking result, I'm going to measure down 5 inches, and that's going to give me about a 1/2 inch overhang with my starter strip to match the shingle. And now we're going to do the same like we chalked this line, get a measurement in the middle and end, and then chalk it. Now we got a chalked line for both our starter and our first row. That's going to make it turn out the best. I can now begin installing the starter strip and our first rows. Something I'd like to point out, whenever you nail your starter strip on, you need to be thinking about where the breaks of these tabs are going to be because you don't want to place nails there. So if you lay this up here, that's roughly where it's going to be starting. So you don't want to place a nail where this break is in the starter strip. So keep that in mind. So about that chalk line, and right here is about where this cap nail is. You want to avoid that area. So we're going to place the starter strip that we cut down first. So we're going to place this here, and we got to get about a 1/2 inch overhang like we mentioned before. And we don't have to get this quite perfect because we have one coming down here. So right there looks pretty good. So I'm just going to hand nail this on. Then after I get going, I'm going to switch to the coil nailer. But for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to hand nail them on. Right here's where the break's going to be, so we want to stay back from it. So we're going to nail this back over here. And we'll come over here. We know the one break's right here. I'll just nail this end for now. And I like to place 2 nails at each area here in the center. So 2 nails here, 2 nails here, and then 1 on each end. And that double nail pattern is going to be the strongest pattern. So I'd recommend doing the double nailing. I can now install the next starter, same idea. For up the rake side, I'm just going to use a full shingle. And I'm going to lay this to where it's going to overhang a 1/2 inch if we follow our chalked line. We want to avoid placing it over this strip here because that's going to stop the adhesion. So we want to hold it up from it a little bit. So right here looks good. We'll nail that right into place. Just so you're aware, you could also cut starter strip or use starter strip on the rake side as well. Because I'm doing this mainly to keep the overhang looking consistent, it's essentially not doing anything. Now, if you did use starter strip, it would give you a little tar strip there at the end, but in my opinion, that's really not going to make or break your install. We can now begin installing our first shingle, so I'm going to get a full shingle to start with. It's very simple. All I have to do is line up with that chalked line that we marked at 11.5, give us 1/2 inch overhang. Then we're going to line up flush with this edge of our starter going up the rake. And that's all there is, and nail it into place, and I use the double nail method. And this is to be nailed right here, right below that tar strip. So you're going to have your next shingle overlap here. So right here is going to give us a good place to place the nail. And you can see using the 2 nail method, they're about 2 inches apart or so, 1 inch off each side of the break where the tab is, then 1 on each end, and that's really all there is to nailing the actual shingle on. So technically we're at 5 5/8 inch where you place your nails if you want an exact measurement. In order to start the second row, all we have to do is line it up flush with the edge of the starter on the rake. And we also need to line up the bottom of the shingle more or less right at the top of this cutout. That's going to be an exposure of 5 inches. So technically 5 inches up from shingle to shingle. Then for the next row, we just rinse and repeat that until we place all of our starters on. As I am sure you are already noticing, it's a systematic approach when it comes to installing the shingles. I like to run 6 rows at a time. 6 rows are going to be all the starter shingles used. I feel like the shingles tend to go quicker the more rows you have started. I like to run the first row and the starter strip kind of at the same time. I'll shoot the starter strip on at the ends because I don't know where the break is in the shingle. Then I'll place the first row shingles on. Then after I have them on, what I like to do then is lift up the shingle and look under it to where a nail can be placed without hitting into a seam and causing a leak. I just think it's a little quicker than trying to measure and plan out for where to nail it on the starter strip, as you can see here. We're now going to measure up after we got 5 rows, and you can see to the top of this one we got 32 inches. So we're going to mark 32 inches down here so we have a chalk line to go off of to make sure we're not running off. So you can see we have an exposure of 5 inches, so we got 25, 20, 15, so you can see every 5 inches you could chalk a line if you wanted to. We marked 32 inches up off the other side of the roof, held the chalk line into place from mark to mark and chalked a line. You can see we now have a straight line at the top of that row. So once we get to that row, we run it with the chalk line. We do not try to line up with the tabs. That tends to keep the shingles running true because whenever you're lining it up with the tabs, you can get off some. Then over several rows, it can get off significantly. So pay close attention to how straight your rows are running. Now with that said, for some reason, if you were off a lot and you held the shingle on that string line on that row, you can take it out over several rows so you don't have an abrupt difference whenever you're looking down the shingles. I'm here as far as I can go with full shingles, so I now need to cut to finish these rows. It's as simple as using your tape measure, measure to the shingle off the edge of the rake. And this is our piece that we put on for our overhang so that we have a straight line to go off of. So it's very simple, just measure right off that to get your length. So now I'm just going to get the measurement for all these that need cut to finish up. I just got a scrap block I'm going to write my measurements on for each row. Another option you have too is to keep your shingle longer and then cut it off with a hook blade. But I don't like to do that. It gives a much better job to cut these ahead of time in my opinion. So there's multiple ways to cut these at the end. I like to pre-cut them. I'm now going to go to my cut station and cut these. Now I want to make sure when I cut these that I don't cut them to where the factory edge is not butting up. You want to make sure your factory edge is butting up. Very important, especially for 3 tabs. Dimensionals, you can get away with not doing that, but not with 3 tabs. So for instance, this is going to butt up for the row that's already there, and then we're going to cut it to length. So always pull off your right area on the shingle, and also keep the scrap. You can use the scrap to finish up the rows on the other side of the roof, so it's important to keep all of your scraps while you're making your cuts. Same idea, we just nail the cut pieces into place, and one great thing, if you're just an 1/8 inch short or something, you won't see it because of the shingle that's on the rake side. So that's one great benefit, again, to putting a shingle down the rake. Since this is short, we can pop 1 or 2 up here to hold it a little better. I apologize for the hissing noise you are hearing. It's a leak around the connection for where my air hose enters the gun. And you can also add that nail to the starters at the beginning as well if you want to add security. We placed another layer of scaffolding together, so now we can reach up higher. We're going to move our walkboards up to the next rung. If you are going to be installing shingles on a barn like I'm doing here, I highly recommend that you get scaffolding that you see here, because doing this off a ladder would be almost impossible in my opinion. Here at the end with these 3-tab shingles, you do have to watch, because wherever you nail, you can see it's going to be close to where the break is in the shingle, because you don't have a choice other than to nail it at the end to hold the shingle on, of course. So areas like this, you definitely want to use some kind of really good rubberized caulk, something that's going to definitely seal those nails well. You could even use the asphalt type caulking, but I found this rubberized caulk is definitely better. So I'm going to place some right here over these nails, and I'm also going to use it to seal down these little shingles that we finish up the runs with. That's going to help minimize them blowing off. So I'm going to definitely reinforce this area with the rubberized caulk. So again, touch up any nail that's going to be close to causing issues. You can tell it's going to seal down really well. That's definitely going to help reinforce those ends. I don't typically have to do shingles off scaffolding, but because of this barn, like I said, I had to. Now, something I would like to say, it is very comfortable doing shingles this way. You almost get spoiled running it off a scaffold because you don't have to bend down in order to install them where it's more flat, like on top of the roof. So it is a good perk to using scaffolding as far as ease of doing it, and it is helpful having a second person feed you the shingles as you place them on. It speeds it up a lot. Where the lower slope and the upper slope of the barn roof meet, the shingle is going to have to be nailed across the top, as you can see here, to keep it bent tight. And then these shingles that drape over will eventually get warm enough to where they will bend with the bend of the roof and then seal down properly. To get the rest of the shingles on the roof, I had my Bobcat on hand, which made the process easy. It's much better than carrying shingles up a ladder. And we're going to now continue running the rest of the shingles on the other side of the roof on the lower slope before I get on the roof to finish up the top. Finish up the drip edge, very simple. All I did was cut and bend it around the top of the roof. Make sure I place my overlap correctly at the bottom, and then I'm going to mark and cut the overlap for the other side, and that's going to give us a nice finished edge. We then continue the chalk line, then place our rake edge shingle to give us our finished edge of the shingles. And you can see on this side it looks good, and then on the other side did the same thing. So it's the same process as before, other than they're going to join at the top. I'm now going to chalk another line since we're up the roof far enough. And this time what we want to do is double check to see how straight our rows are running in case we got to manipulate it like I explained before. Because the best way to get your shingles to run straight is to use the chalk line method. And you can see I'm measuring in the middle, then I come down a little further, measure again. We got 4 3/4 here as well. So we know that the middle bends upwards. So we need to start on our typical chalk line because that's going to cover up just fine as we go. Now if it was the opposite, we would have to drop the road down a 1/4 inch so that way it covers it up and it continues a straight line. You'll notice when you're installing shingles, it's a very systematic thing. Once you get rolling with it, it's almost like you're getting a flow and it goes fairly quick. Now that we have the shingles themselves on, we need to talk about how we are going to vent our shingles. You must vent the shingles. If you don't vent the shingles, they'll deteriorate quicker and they'll also cause a buildup of heat in general in your attic. So you definitely need to vent your shingles. So there's 2 ways that are commonly practiced to do that. One is to install a gable vent. Here at the gable end of each side of this barn, I could cut a hole out, place a vent. The draft would wick all the heat out of the attic, and that's going to help significantly with the ventilation issue. So you could do that, but what we're going to install is what's called ridge vent. Ridge vent's great because that's going to allow the heat to go right up to the peak, then right out of the top below the caps, and that's going to be the best way to vent in my opinion. This is the ridge vent here, and it has a mesh that's going to keep the bugs out from one side, and then the top here is going to have shingles placed over them known as caps. So it's going to look really good from below, and it's also going to last for many years. So I'm going to show you how to cut the caps to install the ridge vent. We have 2 options when it comes to making caps. One, we can purchase the caps, and they come to where all we have to do is bend them apart off of each other, and then we can use them immediately. Very simple, no cutting involved. So you have that option, and each pack of the caps by GAF called Sealer Ridge covers 25 linear feet. So we're going to need additional caps anyway, so I'm going to show you how to cut them using the 3-tab shingle. So right here would be a cap. Each cap has a 6 3/8 exposure, meaning that's how much coverage we're going to have with each cap. So we got those, but I'm going to show you how to cut them using the 3-tab shingle if you do not want to purchase the caps. You can see this looks really similar to what I just showed you there. So ultimately all we have to do is flip this around and cut right at the center at each of the grooves where the tabs are. So that's going to give us 3 caps with 2 cuts. We're just going to cut it like I showed you before on how to cut the shingles. Very straightforward. All right, as you can see, this looks really similar to the pre-made cap where you just break off, but the only difference is these, we would use this bottom part, and the reason why that is because this part has that slit in it, if you remember, from an area to cut from. So we want to use this side because there is no slit in it. So that's the only bit of difference, and this is a 5-inch exposure versus the 6 3/8, so you do get less coverage per cap. Whichever option you go with is fine. Here is how you can cut a lot of caps at once. If you stack multiples together, you would simply follow the same process, other than you're going to have to cut several times to cut through all of them. But after you do that, look at this. We got a ton of caps already, and that's just from cutting up a stack of shingles, and we got plenty to get started. I'm going to show you how to cut starters out of the caps. We want to make sure that we keep this adhesive here, and that's going to be what we use, just like a starter strip. So essentially, all we have to do is cut off this area, and that's going to be a little piece of starter strip that's going to be for starting the caps. All we're going to do is cut off the tab. So pretty much like making our standard starter strip, other than this is pre-cut to the length we need, really, is the only difference. And if you're going to cut the starter strip out of the caps that are already pre-made, same idea. We would just cut off this area, then use this as the starter strip. Because the ridge vent is about 1 inch thick, you're going to have to go through that, then through an 1/8 inch worth of shingles, and then you're going to have to go through the underlayment and plywood in order to secure your caps to the ridge vent. So you're going to need longer nails. I'm going to be using 3-inch nails, and these are smooth shank, and they're 3-inch, so they're going to penetrate clear through the roofing deck, so you should not have any issues using 3-inch smooth shank nails. But if you do have ring shank nails available, I would recommend those over smooth shank. So I'm going to show you a demonstration why this is important to use a longer nail. This is why you need to use longer nails. If this is the decking on the roof, it's typically 7/16, which is about a 1/2 inch. You'll have that, then you'll have your shingle on top of that, and you will have your underlayment, but that's really thin, really doesn't count for much. Then you have your ridge vent itself, then you have your cap. As you can see, the 1¼ inch nail does not penetrate clear through the deck. It only goes in so far. You need to use a longer nail. Here's the 3-inch nail. It penetrates plenty through there. So I recommend using at least 2.5, 3 inches, a little excessive, but that's going to be plenty to hold down the caps on the ridge vent. To allow the roof to vent, there must not be any roof underlayment or shingle overlapping the peak where the air will come up through. At each end of the roof, I left a little over a foot of the sheathing going clear up to the peak, and I will just place caps over those areas and not place vent because it does help the roof look better. What you see me doing here now is removing the shingle that I left here towards the end using a utility knife. And what some people do, they'll run their sheathing when they put the roof on, their shingle and the underlayment all up over the peak, and then just take a skill saw or circular saw and cut out 1 inch each way from the peak. But I think that's a little risky because you risk cutting into a truss or something of that nature. So I find it best to pre-cut the shingle and the sheathing as you go. So I'm just going to remove this underlayment from the very peak before placing on the ridge vent. To begin the cap installation, we're going to begin with the starter strip that we cut. For these short 1-foot runs here at each end, I'm just going to eyeball its center. Now if it was a long run, I would chalk it, which I'm going to show you that more here later. So now that we are even and flush with the edge of the roof, I'm going to place 2 nails directly behind the tar strip, and here we can use our coil nailer because we do not have ridge vent underneath, so it's totally fine. So 2 nails about 1 inch, 1.5 inches up, and right behind the tar strip is the best way to install the caps in my experience. As for the next cap, we're going to lay it directly over the starter strip, similar how you would do a shingle. And once you have it in place, same idea, we're going to place 2 nails on each side right behind the tar strip like you see here. I like to use the 2 nail method simply because while you're nailing, why not add a couple extra nails for security? And I'm going to run the caps directly up to where we need to stop. Then I'm going to take my utility knife and recut the section out where the overlap is. So that way it'll give us plenty of coverage underneath of the ridge vent once we begin installing that. Clearly, I'm going to go to the other side of the roof and install the caps at that 12-inch section as well. You want symmetry, so you want to try to keep your ridge vent in the center of your roof, and the same amount of area without the ridge vent should be the same on each side. To begin the ridge vent installation over top of the ridge, we're going to lay a section of ridge vent right on the area where it's going to be installed and center it up, and you want to eyeball, or you could even measure and use a red pencil or crayon that will mark on the shingle so you can see it clearly. And we're going to get a great mark on one side or the other of the ridge vent. You could mark both sides and chalk the line on each side, and I find it's totally fine just to chalk one side, but if you're really particular, you could do both sides. So I'm going to do the same on the other side of the roof. You can see we got a bright red mark here. Now we're just going to chalk a line from mark to mark so we have a really straight line to go with, so our ridge vent goes on really nice. Install the ridge vent by lining it up onto that chalked line. You would also want to make sure you get your 12 inches from the end of the roof or whatever your measurement is off the edge. Wherever you place it down at is where it's going to stay. Using a 3-inch fastener, whether it's a screw or a roofing nail, I just happen to have exterior screws that I need to use up, so I'm using that to fasten down the ridge vent. But commonly you would simply use a 3-inch roofing nail. I'm lining up the edge right with that chalked line. This particular ridge vent has holes already pre-drilled for you to install your screws or nails. Most ridge vents will have those holes for you so you don't have to guess how many fasteners to place. And you gotta remember, once you install your caps are going to have 3-inch nails as well, which is what truly holds everything together. After the side with the chalked line is installed on the line, I'm going to flex the ridge vent over the ridge and then fasten the other side to the other side of the roof and make sure that we are centered and squared. That's how you fasten each ridge vent panel. As for the next one, some brands will actually have a lip to overlap, then some butt up together. It all depends on the ridge vent manufacturer how they want you to install it. Once I got towards the end of the roof, I had to use a sawzall in order to cut to finish. Now I want to make sure I place the factory edge out, that way you don't have an open end on the ridge vent. In order to install the cap, same idea as when we began. We place our starter strip and then we're going to hand drive 3-inch nails in the same location that we placed the nails in the other caps. And you can see after we have them installed, we're right behind the tar strip and the nail penetrates through everything and holds it together very nice. And I wanted to just show you some different areas where the nails are. You can see it's right behind that tar strip, so the water should not hit the nail. And once we get to the very end, I'm going to use the sealant in order to install the very last cap. It's going to have to be cut to length, and once you nail through the top of it, you're going to have to seal on top of those nails. There's really no other way to finish up the caps. You're going to have a nail to caulk over eventually, installing almost any shingled roof. I also like to place sealant at each end of the ridge vent because it does have slight holes where it flexes around, and I think it's best to seal it that way. If we look up underneath the roof, you can see our 3-inch nails have penetrated through the decking with plenty of distance. After it's all said and done, this is what the roof will look like. You can see we have a nice uniform pattern of the 3-tab shingles, and the ridge vent looks really good and clean and sharp. This should give me a great roof for at least 25 years. If you'd like to see how I installed these architectural shingles on this roof that you see here behind me, check out this video. It'll help you out.